I was looking at the timeline in the dossier you sent over for this deep dive, and something kind of stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
We usually think of empires as these solid, immovable things. The Roman Empire, the British Empire, they feel permanent.
Right, they feel like monuments, like they're carved out of stone.
Exactly. But this story, the Mughal story, it doesn't start with a monument. It starts with a teenager who is, for all intents and purposes, homeless. He's running for his life in the mountains of Central Asia.
It is a jarring contrast, isn't it? We associate the Mughals with the Taj Mahal, with absolute power, with, diamonds the size of eggs.
Yeah.
But the founder, Babur, at the start of our story, he's basically a refugee. He's a prince without a kingdom, probably shivering in a cave somewhere.
And yet this one dynasty goes on to define the aesthetic, the cuisine, the administration, the very identity of India for over 300 years. We're talking about an empire that, at its peak, commanded nearly a quarter of the world's GDP.
The scale is just staggering. And I think when most people hear the name Mughal, their minds immediately go to the architecture. They think of beautiful marble, maybe some nice symmetric gardens.
Sure, that's the postcard image.
But the story we're looking at today is so much more visceral than just pretty buildings.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story of gunpowder. It's a story of fratricide. Brothers, killing brothers for the throne. It's a story of incredible administrative genius and, frankly, some colossal failures.
It really is.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into the rise and fall of the Mughal Empire.
And we are covering the whole arc. We're not just doing the greatest hits. We're going from 1526 all the way to 1857.
Right.
From that explosive, gunpowder-fueled beginning with Babur, all the way to the slow, painful fragmentation and the eventual replacement by British rule.
And we have a serious stack of sources for this one. We're working from a detailed historical dossier that covers everything: the lineage of the rulers, military strategies, tax codes, art, and the specific nitty-gritty reasons why it all fell apart.
What I love about this particular set of sources is that it doesn't just give us the great man history.
No.
It digs into the mechanics. How did they actually tax the peasants? How did they measure the land? It's in those details that you understand why the empire worked, and ultimately why it broke.
So here's our roadmap for the hour. We're going to start with the Great Mughals, the Big Six, from Babur to Aurangzeb.
The heavy hitters.
Then we're going to geek out a bit on the administrative genius, including a guy named Sher Shah Suri, who wasn't even a Mughal, but, he changed the game.
Oh, he's a crucial figure. You absolutely cannot understand the Mughals without understanding that interregnum.
Then we'll look at the cultural shifts, the religious policies, the art. And finally, we're going to watch the slow-motion car crash that was the later Mughals and the ultimate collapse.
It is a tragedy in the classical sense. A rise to these dizzying heights, and then a fall caused by the very things that made them great in the first place.
So let's start at the genesis. Section 1. Babur. The year is 1526. But before we even get to India, we have to talk about this guy's DNA. Because talk about a power couple lineage.
Yeah.
If you were writing a fantasy novel and you gave your main character this ancestry, the editor would tell you to tone it down.
It's quite literally the ultimate warrior pedigree. Babur has a dual ancestry that is almost hard to believe.
Go on.
On his father's side, he is a direct descendant of Timur, or Tamerlane, the great Turco-Mongol conqueror who sacked Delhi back in 1398.
Okay, so that's a serious claim to fame right there.
And then on his mother's side, he traces his lineage back to none other than Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan. Wow. So he's got the blood of two of the, scariest conquerors in history running through his veins. That's a lot of pressure on a kid.
It is. And because of that Timurid lineage, the Mughals are often referred to by historians as the Timurids. But here's the interesting thing. Babur didn't start out wanting India. He didn't really care about India.
Right. That's the irony I found in the notes. He wasn't sitting in Central Asia dreaming of Delhi. He was dreaming of Samarkand.
Precisely. Babur succeeded his father in ruling the small principality called Fergana, which is in modern-day Uzbekistan. His whole life's ambition was to conquer Samarkand, the ancestral capital of Timur.
But he kept failing.
He kept failing. He faced immense financial strain, and there was a rising threat from the Uzbeks.
He wins it, loses it, wins it, loses it. At one point, the sources say he's wandering the hills with just a handful of followers, sleeping in shepherds' huts.
It was a desperate situation.
Yeah.
So India was absolutely plan B, maybe even plan C.
He needed a base.
He needed a strategic base.
Yeah.
He needed resources. He had conquered Kabul and Kandahar, and he convinced himself he had a rightful claim to territories like the Punjab. because his ancestor Timur had annexed them previously.
A bit of a stretch, maybe.
A bit, but fundamentally, he was pushed toward India because he had nowhere else to go.
That sets the stage perfectly. He's desperate, he's ambitious, and he's looking south. And that brings us to the First Battle of Panipat in 1526. This feels like the moment where medieval warfare changes forever.
It is a watershed moment. You have Babur facing off against Ibrahim Lodi, the Sultan of Delhi.
Okay.
Now, if you just look at the tail of the tape, Lodi has the numbers. He has a massive army. He has war elephants, which are essentially the tanks of the era.
Right. Intimidating.
But Babur has something Lodi doesn't fully appreciate.
The Gunpowder Empire.
Exactly. Babur brings artillery, but it's not just the guns, it's the tactics. The sources describe this tactical aha moment as the introduction of the Rumi method.
The Rumi method. This is Ottoman, right?
Yes, Rumi refers to the Ottomans. Babur had observed how the Ottomans fought in Europe and the Middle East. It involved a very specific defensive formation.
So what did he do?
He used carts, just ordinary baggage carts, and tied them together with rawhide ropes to create a mobile barricade.
So he created a portable fortress in the middle of the battlefield.
Correct. And between these carts, he placed his matchlockmen, his musketeers, and his cannons. This gave them cover. They could fire, reload, and fire again without getting trampled by cavalry.
But he didn't just sit behind the carts. There was an offensive part of the strategy, too, something called the Tuluma system. That sounds intense. What is it?
It's a classic flanking maneuver, but, perfected. While the enemy is distracted by this wall of carts and cannon fire in the center, Babur divides his army into these flanking units, left and right wings, that sweep around the sides and the rear of the enemy.
So Lodi is just stuck. He charges the center, he hits a wall of carts and gets blasted by cannons. He tries to retreat and he's getting encircled from behind.
And you have to remember, Lodi's army relies heavily on elephants.
And tanks.
Right. And elephants are terrifying, but they're still animals. When those cannons go off, the noise, the smoke, the shock waves, the elephants panic. They turn around and trample their own troops. It was an absolute massacre.
Wow.
Babur defeated a much, much larger force through superior technology and tactics.
And just like that, the Sultanate is gone, and the Mughal Empire begins. But Babur didn't just stop at Panipat. He had to consolidate, right? Because just beating the king doesn't mean you own the kingdom.
Oh, absolutely. Taking Delhi and Agra was just step one. He had to deal with the Rajputs next. This leads to the Battle of Kanwa in 1527 against Rana Sanga.
And Rana Sanga seems like a much more serious player than Lodi. This wasn't a pushover battle.
Not at all. Rana Sanga was a veteran warrior who had built this formidable confederacy of Rajput kings. The man was missing an eye, an arm, and had dozens of scars.
Jeez.
He looked at Babur as just another invader who would, loot and leave. When he realized Babur was staying, he attacked. And it was actually a much tougher fight than Panipat because the Rajputs were just fearless.
This is where Babur gets dramatic, right? The sources mention he broke his wine cups.
Yes. The morale of Babur's troops was collapsing. They were terrified of the Rajputs. So Babur made this grand gesture. He renounced wine, which he loved, and broke all his precious wine vessels in front of the army.
A bit of theater.
Total theater. He framed the battle as a holy war, a jihad, and he took the title of Ghazi after the victory. It worked. They won.
And he also fought the Battle of Chanderi in 1528 and the Battle of Gagra in 1529 against the Afghans. He was basically fighting nonstop from the moment he arrived.
He was constantly on the move. But he didn't rule for very long. He died in 1530 in Agra.
But before he died, he left a mark on the landscape that I think is really cool. The gardens?
The charbagh. This is a crucial cultural import. You have to remember, Babur found the Indian landscape. Well, lacking, to put it politely.
Well, that's right.
In his memoirs, he complained about the heat, the dust, the lack of orderly water. He missed the streams of Fergana.
So he decided to terraform.
Essentially. He introduced these Persian-style gardens, 4-part gardens, symmetric, geometric, with water channels running through them.
It's about control, isn't it? Imposing order.
Exactly. It was an attempt to impose order on what he saw as chaotic Indian nature. You can still see this in the Rambagh and Zarabagh in Agra. It's a physical manifestation of the Mughal mindset. Order, geometry, beauty amidst the chaos.
And we know all these inner thoughts because he wrote them down. The Tuzuki Baburi, or the Baburnama.
One of the most remarkable documents in history. It's written in Chagatai Turkish, his mother tongue, not the courtly Persian. And it is so candid.
Oh, so...
He writes about military strategy, sure, but he also writes about the flora and fauna. He critiques the people. He talks about his own failures, his drinking, his emotions. It's not the propaganda you usually get from emperors.
It's like reading a diary.
It is a memoir in the truest sense. It reveals this complex man who is a brilliant general, but also, a homesick poet.
So Babur dies in 1530, and he passes the baton to his son, Humayun. And this is where the story gets, well, a little shaky.
Shaky is an understatement. Humayun inherited an empire that wasn't really an empire yet. It was just a collection of conquered territories held together by force.
It wasn't consolidated.
Not at all. The administration was loose, the finances were unstable, and his brothers were already conspiring against him.
And Humayun himself seems like an interesting character. The notes mention something called the celestial clock.
Yes, this gives you a real peek into his psychology. Humayun was obsessed with astrology. Truly obsessed. He didn't just read horoscopes. He governed state affairs based on planetary positions.
Wait, what? Like checking your horoscope before passing a law?
More like organizing the entire government around it. He planned journeys, battles, court events, all by reading the planets. If Mars was in a certain position, maybe that's a day for justice. If Venus was ascending, that's a day for art.
He even dressed to match.
He even dressed in colors corresponding to the planets on specific days.
That seems incredibly inefficient, especially when you have sharks circling the water.
It certainly didn't help him against the very pragmatic threats he was facing. Specifically, a man named Sher Shah Suri.
Okay, Sher Shah Suri. This is the guy who interrupts the Mughal storyline. Section 2 of our outline calls this the stumble and the interlude.
Sher Shah Suri is fascinating. He was an Afghan noble, not a Mughal. He saw the weakness in Humayun. He saw the focus on astrology rather than administration, and he struck.
He defeats Humayun decisively.
Decisively. First at the Battle of Chausa in 1539.
That's the battle where Humayun barely escaped, right? He almost drowned.
Yes, he nearly drowned in the Ganges. He was saved by a water carrier, a Nizam, who offered him his inflated skin raft to float across.
And the story is he let the guy sit on the throne for a day.
For half a day, supposedly. A great story, but it just shows how desperate things were.
And then it happened again.
And then again at Kannauj in 1540. This is the final blow. Humayun became a fugitive. He had to leave India entirely, wandering through the deserts of Sind and eventually ending up in Persia.
So for 15 years, there is no Mughal Empire in India. It's the Sur Empire.
It is.
And Sher Shah Suri, even though he's the enemy in the Mughal story, actually lays the groundwork for their future success.
This is a critical point. Historians often say that Sher Shah Suri was the administrative father of the Mughal Empire. The Mughals, when they finally came back, basically just copied his homework.
Let's look at his reforms. The source mentions a ray system for revenue. This sounds dry, but I feel like it's really important.
It is the bedrock of a stable state. Before this, tax collection was often arbitrary, whatever the local lord felt like taking. Sher Shah introduced the ray system, which standardized crop rates.
Okay.
But the real innovation, the thing that shows his genius, was how they measured the land.
This is the detail that blew my mind. Measuring land by studying shadows.
It sounds primitive, but it was actually quite scientific for the 16th century. Officials measured fields by studying the shadows of standing crops at different times of the day to calculate the area.
Wow.
It allowed for a much more accurate assessment of how much land was actually being cultivated versus just sitting empty.
That is so clever. It's applying geometry to tax collection. And he also gave the peasants rights, didn't he? A deed of some kind.
He did. He introduced the pata, which is a title deed, and the kabuliyat, which was a deed of agreement.
And what did that do?
It meant the peasant knew exactly what they owed, and the state knew exactly what to expect. Reduced corruption and exploitation. If you know what you owe, the tax collector can't shake you down for more.
And he built the Grand Trunk Road?
Restored and extended it, yes. From Sonargaon in Bengal all the way to Peshawar in the northwest. And he built sarais, or rest houses, every few miles.
So it's not just a road.
No, it wasn't just for travelers. It was for trade and for the postal system. He created a nervous system for the empire.
And money. We can't forget the money.
The rupiah. He introduced a standardized silver coin weighing exactly 178 grains. This became the standard currency for centuries. It's the precursor to the modern rupee. It standardized trade across the region because merchants finally trusted the currency.
So Sher Shah is running a tight ship. He's a brilliant administrator, but then he dies in a gunpowder accident.
Ironically, yes. In 1545, while besieging the Kalinjar fort, he was standing near a stockpile of gunpowder when a rocket rebounded off the wall and landed in the pile.
Oh, no.
An explosion. He was burned severely and died.
Talk about living by the sword and dying by the sword. Or the rocket, in this case.
His successors weren't nearly as capable, and the Sur Empire fragmented, and that opened the door for Humayun to come back.
So Humayun returns in 1555. He's been hanging out in Persia with the Safavids this whole time.
And that exile was crucial culturally. When Humayun came back, he didn't just bring soldiers. He brought Persian painters, Mir Sayyid Ali and Abd al-Samad.
And this is the beginning of Mughal painting.
This is the moment the Mughal school of painting is born. It's that blend of Persian finesse, the fine lines, the detail, and Indian vibrancy.
But Humayun's second act is tragically short.
Very short. Just a year later, in 1556, he was in his library in Delhi, the Shir Mandal. He heard the call to prayer, the azan. He hurried to go down these steep stone stairs, caught his foot in his robe, and just tumbled down. He fractured his skull and died a few days later.
Talk about bad luck. Lost his empire to astrology and bad tactics, gets it back, and then trips on a staircase.
As the historian Stanley Langpool famously put it, Humayun stumbled out of life just as he stumbled through it.
Ouch. That is a brutal epitaph. But his death brings us to the main event. Section 3, the Golden Age. Akbar.
Akbar, the Great. He is crowned at age 13. Can you imagine that? You're a teenager, your dad just fell down the stairs, the empire is shaky, and you have enemies everywhere.
He had a regent, though, right? Bayram Khan.
Yes, and Bayram Khan saved the day initially. He led the Mughal forces at the Second Battle of Panipat in 1556 against Timu.
And Timu is an interesting character.
Very. He was a Hindu general and minister who had actually captured Delhi and declared himself king, taking the title of Vikramaditya. If the Mughals had lost Panipat II, history would have been very different.
But they won. And once Akbar comes of age and takes full control, he just goes on a tear.
His expansionist policy was relentless. He conquers Malwa, Gondwana, and importantly, Gujarat.
Why was Gujarat so important? Is it just about acquiring more land?
No, it's the coast. Gujarat was the launch pad for trade with the Arab world and with Europe. It was the moneymaker. It connected the Mughal Empire to the global economy.
And he had to deal with the Rajputs again, the Battle of Haldigati in 1576.
A legendary battle. Mughal forces actually led by a Rajput general, Man Singh, which shows you Akbar's diplomatic genius.
Right.
Against Maharana Pratap of Mewar. And while the Mughals won the field, Maharana Pratap didn't surrender. He retreated to the hills and continued a guerrilla war. But strategically, Akbar managed to bring most Rajput states under his suzerainty through a mix of force and marriage alliances.
But Akbar isn't just known for battles, he's known for the system. We need to do a deep dive into the Mansabdari system. The source material calls this the steel frame of the empire.
It is.
But when I read the details, Sawar, joggers, it feels like I'm reading a very complicated corporate HR manual.
Perhaps. It is an HR manual. That is exactly what it is, a very, very effective one.
So help me decode it. Let's say I'm a hotshot general in 1580. I want power. In Europe, I'd ask the king for a castle and some land, and that land becomes mine forever. My kids inherit it. Is that what happens here?
No. And that is the single most important difference between the Mughal Empire and feudal Europe. If you are a Mughal noble, a Mansabdar, you do not own the land.
I don't own it.
You manage it. It's a salary assignment. Let's look at the Zat and Sawar ranks again. Zat is your personal status. Think of it like your pay grade in the military captain, major, colonel. That decides how much money you personally take home to feed your family and buy nice silk robes.
Okay, so Zat is my paycheck. Got it.
Right. Sawar is your obligation. If you have a Sawar rank of 5,000, you are contractually obligated to maintain 5,000 cavalrymen, horses, and equipment for the emperor.
And how do I pay for those horses?
The emperor gives you the right to collect taxes from a specific district, a jagir, that is estimated to generate enough revenue to cover the cost of those horses.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, and here's the genius part, you get moved.
Moved?
Every 2 or 3 years. The emperor says, great job collecting taxes in Bengal. Pack your bags, you're moving to the Punjab.
Wow. So I can never build a local power base. I can't make the peasants loyal to me instead of the emperor.
Precisely. You are a rootless elite. You are wealthy, powerful, but completely dependent on the center. It prevented the kind of fragmentation that plagued Europe for centuries.
And how did they stop people from cheating? Like showing up with borrowed horses for inspection day.
Da and Chera. Dog was the branding system. Every single imperial horse had to be branded with a specific mark so you couldn't borrow your friend's horse for the inspection.
That's smart.
And Chera was a descriptive role of every soldier. Complexion, scars, height, any identifying marks. It was a paper-based biometric ID system from the 16th century.
That is incredibly sophisticated. But Playing devil's advocate here, if I don't own the land and I know I'm moving every 2 years, do I really care about the long-term health of the land?
Ah, you've spotted the flaw, the built-in flaw. Institutionalized short-termism.
Right.
If I'm only in this district for 2 years, why should I care if the irrigation system works in 10 years? I'm going to squeeze every last penny out of the peasants now before I get transferred.
So it solves one problem rebellion, but it creates another huge one exploitation.
Exactly. And as we'll see later when we talk about the Jagirdari crisis, this is a time bomb ticking away right in the heart of the administration.
Okay, let's talk about the money again. The land revenue system. We saw the start of this with Sher Shah, but Akbar's finance minister, Raja Todar Mal, he took it to the next level.
Raja Todar Mal is a legend in administrative history. He introduced the Dasala system in 1580.
Dasala. That means 10 years.
Yes. Instead of guessing the tax rate every single year based on that year's harvest, they calculated the average yield and the average price of the last 10 years.
And that does what?
It smooths out the volatility for both the peasants and the state. You have a bad harvest one year, doesn't bankrupt you. The state gets a predictable revenue stream.
And they classified the land, too. It wasn't just a flat tax.
Very specifically, Polaj was land that was cultivated every single year that was taxed at the highest rate. Parati was land left fallow for a year or two to recover. Chachar was fallow for 3 to 4 years. And Banjar was uncultivated for 5 years or more, taxed the lowest.
So it's data-driven governance.
It's absolutely data-driven governance. The Ain-i-Akbari, which is the 3rd volume of the Akbarnama, is basically a massive Excel spreadsheet of the entire empire.
Let's shift to the thing Akbar is perhaps most famous for today, his religious policy, Suikul.
Universal peace. Akbar realized a fundamental truth. To rule India, a predominantly Hindu country, as a Muslim emperor, he couldn't be an alien oppressor. He had to be inclusive.
So the first big move was abolishing the jizya tax.
Yes, the tax on non-Muslims, that was a huge symbolic and financial relief for the Hindu population. He also abolished the pilgrimage tax.
And he built the Ibadat Khana.
The Hall of Prayers at his new capital, Fatehpur Sikri. This, to me, is my favorite image of Akbar. He invites everyone, Hindus, Muslims, Jains, Christians, Zoroastrians. He sits them down and says, let's debate what is the truth.
And apparently these debates got really heated.
Very heated. The mullahs would scream at the priests at the yogis, but it shows his incredible intellectual curiosity. He wasn't satisfied with dogma. And this eventually led him to propose Dini Ilahi.
His own religion.
Well, historians debate if it was a full-blown religion or just an ethical code of conduct, divine monotheism. It was syncretic, blending elements of Islam, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism. It centered on the emperor as a spiritual guide.
But it didn't really catch on, did it?
No, not at all. It was an elite club.
Yeah.
Only a handful of people like Birbal ever joined. It basically died with Akbar.
But the spirit of Sulikul, that spirit of tolerance, became the bedrock of the empire's stability for the next century.
And that atmosphere allowed art and culture to flourish.
Absolutely.
Speaking of flourishing, he had the Navratnas, the 9 gems at his court. Akbar surrounded himself with talent. Tansen, the musician whose voice could supposedly light lamps. Birbal, the witty advisor. Abul Fazl, the intellectual who wrote the Akbarnama.
And the Maktab Khana, the translation bureau.
Yes, this was huge. They were translating Sanskrit classics into Persian. They translated the Mahabharata and called it the Raznama, which means the Book of Wars. They translated the Lilavati, a text on mathematics. Akbar wanted his Muslim nobles to understand the culture of the land they were ruling.
It really does sound like a golden age. But all things must pass. Akbar dies in 1605. Enter Jahangir, Section 4, the Age of Splendor.
Jahangir is often seen as a bit of a party boy compared to his dad, but there's definitely more to him. He was a great lover of art and justice.
Let's talk about the chain of justice, the Zanjir Adal.
He installed this huge golden chain with bells attached to it at Agra Fort. The idea was that anyone, even the poorest peasant who had been wronged by the courts, could come to the fort, ring the bell, and get a personal hearing with the emperor.
Did it actually work? Or was it just a PR stunt?
Probably a bit of both. But the symbolism matters. It showed that the king was the ultimate dispenser of justice, bypassing the bureaucracy.
But his real passion was nature and art.
He completely shifted Mughal painting towards naturalism. He wanted scientific accuracy. If a painter drew a zebra or a turkey, which were exotic animals brought to the court, Jahangir wanted it to look exactly like the real thing. His most famous nature painter was Ustad Mansur.
But we can't talk about Jahangir without talking about Noor Jahan.
The light of the world. She was his wife, but let's be honest, for the latter half of his reign, she was the emperor.
Really?
Jahangir struggled with addiction, alcohol, and opium. Nur Jahan stepped in. Coins were issued in her name. She held court. She was an absolute powerhouse.
And during this time, a couple of Englishmen show up, Captain William Hawkins and Sir Thomas Roe.
A huge foreshadowing moment. Hawkins failed to get a trade deal, but Sir Thomas Roe in 1615, he succeeded. He spent 3 years at the court, and he eventually got permission to establish a factory in Surat.
It seems so small at the time.
Insignificant, just some traders looking for spices and textiles. But that was the foot in the door for the British Empire.
Moving on to the next big name, Shah Jahan, the builder.
If Akbar established the empire's power, Shah Jahan established its majesty. This is the architectural zenith of the empire.
Obviously, the Taj Mahal.
Built for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Completed around 1648. It's perfect symmetry, a poem in marble. But he also built the Red Fort in Delhi, the Jama Masjid. He moved the capital from Agra to a new city he built.
Shahjahanabad.
Modern Delhi.
Exactly.
And the Peacock Throne.
A symbol of unimaginable wealth. A throne just encrusted with rubies, emeralds, diamonds, including the famous Kohinoor. The sources say it cost twice as much as the Taj Mahal to build.
But this splendor had a cost.
A massive cost. The treasury was strained. And you have this administrative bloat. The number of Mansabdars increased, which meant there wasn't enough good land, or Jagirs, to pay them all.
And the source mentions a neglect of military science. This is a critical error. While Shah Jahan was building beautiful marble tombs, the Europeans were improving their firearms, their naval technology, their infantry tactics. The Mughals stopped innovating.
They got comfortable.
They were still relying on heavy cavalry and elephants, while the rest of the world was moving toward light infantry and rapid-fire muskets.
He also started shifting the religious style back a bit, didn't he? A little more orthodox?
He did. He wasn't as liberal as Akbar or Jahangir. He replaced Sida, or full prostration before the emperor, which Orthodox Muslims felt was only for God, with a less reverent bow called Shahar Taslim. It was a move back toward orthodoxy, a signal of what was to come.
And what was to come was a brutal war of succession. Shah Jahan gets sick and his sons just tear each other apart.
A terrible civil war. Dara Shuko, the eldest, was the favorite. He was a liberal intellectual, very much in the mold of Akbar. He translated the Upanishads into Persian. He believed in the unity of religion.
And then you had Aurangzeb.
The orthodox, ruthless, brilliant tactician. Aurangzeb outmaneuvered all of his brothers. He defeated Dara, had him executed, and then he imprisoned his own father, Shah Jahan, in Agra Fort.
Legend says Shah Jahan spent his last years just looking out the window at the Taj Mahal.
A tragic end for the king of the world.
So now we have Section 5, the turning point. Aurangzeb. He ruled from 1658 to 1707. This is where things get very complicated.
Aurangzeb is probably the most controversial figure in Indian history. To some, he is a pious, devout ruler who tried to clean up the state. To others, he is the villain who destroyed the empire's social fabric.
He was called Zindapir, the living saint.
Because of his personal lifestyle. He didn't drink, didn't listen to music, he didn't use the state treasury for personal expenses. He actually sewed his own prayer caps to pay for his food. Incredibly disciplined.
But he imposed that discipline on the state.
He did. He banned court music. He stopped the Sharoka Darshan, the practice of appearing to the public from the balcony, because he thought it was a form of idol worship. And most importantly, he brought back the jizya tax.
And reinstating the jizya was a major turning point.
It was huge. It signaled the end of Akbar's Sulikul. It alienated the Rajput allies who had been the backbone of the military for a century.
And he also ordered the destruction of some temples.
Yes, in places like Mathura and Varanasi. Now, historians debate if this was purely religious zeal or if it was political punishing rebellious chieftains. But the optical fallout was disastrous.
This led to rebellions everywhere. The Jaks, the Satnamis, and the Sikhs.
The conflict with the Sikhs escalated dramatically under Aurangzeb. He ordered the execution of the 9th Sikh guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur, in 1675.
And that was a pivotal moment.
A pivotal moment. It turned the Sikhs from a generally peaceful community into a martial force, the Khalsa, that would eventually plague the empire in the north for decades.
But his biggest problem wasn't in the north. It was the Deccan ulcer.
He spent the last 25 years of his life in the Deccan in the south. He was obsessed with crushing the Marathas, led by the brilliant Shivaji and later his sons, and conquering the independent sultanates Jiagar and Golconda.
He did conquer them, though. The empire got bigger.
He did. The empire reached its greatest territorial extent under Aurangzeb. It covered almost the entire subcontinent. but it was a hollow victory.
Why hollow?
Because he was away from the capital, Delhi, for decades. The administration in the north crumbled because the Superman wasn't there to watch over it. And the treasury was completely emptied fighting these endless wars.
And the Marathas were fighting a guerrilla war, which the Mughals weren't used to.
Exactly. The Mughals were used to big set-piece battles. The Marathas wouldn't give them one. They would raid, cut supply lines, and vanish into the hills. It was bleeding the empire dry. It was like a Vietnam War scenario for the Mughals.
But here's a surprising stat from our sources. Despite his reputation for intolerance, Aurangzeb had the highest number of Hindu officials in the nobility of any Mughal ruler.
Wait, really? That's counterintuitive.
Yeah, that's what the dossier says. Marathas alone constituted nearly 17% of the Mansabdars.
It shows the complexity of the man. He needed them politically and militarily to manage the Deccan, even if his personal ideology was exclusionary. It wasn't black and white. He was pragmatist in some ways and a dogmatist in others.
When Aurangzeb dies in 1707, it feels like the air just goes out of the balloon. We've spent the last 40 minutes talking about great Mughals, titans. Even if you hated them, you respected their competence.
They were larger than life, absolutely.
But now, we entered this period that the historians call the later Mughals. And honestly, reading through the bios of these guys, it's tragic. It's almost a dark comedy.
It is a steep drop-off. You go from men who slept in war tents and led charges to men who were afraid to leave the palace walls.
There's this phrase used for the first successor, Bahadur Shah I, Akbar.
The heedless king.
That sounds like a nickname you'd give a teenager, not an emperor of India. How did the system break so fast? Was it just bad genes?
It wasn't just genes. It was the treasury. You have to remember, Aurangzeb emptied the bank fighting in the south. So when Bahadur Shah takes over, he can't buy loyalty anymore. He starts handing out titles like candy because he has no cash. And when titles become common...
they become worthless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this opens the door for the kingmakers, people who control the throne from behind the scenes.
Then we have Jagirdari Shah, and he introduces something called ijara.
This is the death knell of the economy. Ijara is revenue farming.
What does that mean exactly?
Instead of the state collecting taxes directly through its own officials, like in Akbar's time, the state auctions off the right to collect tax to the highest bidder. So a rich merchant says, I'll give you 100,000 rupees for the right to tax this district. The state takes the cash up front.
And the merchant then goes to the district and squeezes the peasants for 200,000 rupees to make a profit.
Precisely. It destroys the peasantry. It destroys agriculture. It's the state cannibalizing its own future for quick cash.
Then comes Farrukhsiyar.
The era of the Sayyid brothers, the kingmakers. They put him on the throne. And Farrukhsiyar is infamous for the decree of 1717.
The dossier calls this the Magna Carta of company trade.
It was a massive, massive blunder. He granted the British East India Company duty-free trade rights in Bengal for a paltry annual payment of 3,000 rupees.
3,000 rupees for the whole of Bengal.
Yes. It gave the British a massive economic advantage over local Indian traders who still had to pay all the normal taxes. It allowed the company to monopolize trade and build their war chest.
Then we have Muhammad Shah, known as Rangila, or the Colorful.
He ruled for a long time, from 1719 to 1748, but he was detached. He loved the arts, music, dance. He revived the culture that Aurangzeb had suppressed.
Which sounds nice.
It sounds nice, but while he was watching dancers, the empire was physically breaking up. Hyderabad declared independence under Nizam-ul-Mulk. Bengal broke away. Awadh broke away.
And then the death blow, 1739. Nadir Shah invades from Persia.
Nadir Shah. He wasn't there to conquer India. He was there to loot it. He met the Mughal army at the Battle of Karnal.
And this is where that military stagnation we talked about becomes painfully obvious, right?
Painfully obvious. The Mughals were still using this heavy, slow artillery. Nadir Shah had light, swivel guns, Zaburaks mounted on camels. He could move and fire. He smashed the massive Mughal army in just 3 hours.
3 hours? That is humiliating.
It showed the world that the Mughal paper tiger had no teeth. And the looting. He sacked Delhi, he massacred citizens, he took the peacock throne, he took the Kohinoor diamond.
The sources say he took so much treasure that he stopped taxing his own people in Persia for 3 years.
It was a wealth transfer on an unprecedented scale. But worse than the money, it destroyed the mystique of the Mughal emperor. Everyone knew he was weak.
And it didn't stop there. Ahmad Shah Abdali came next.
The Afghan invasions. This culminated in the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. This is a crucial battle because it wasn't the Mughals fighting. It was the Marathas fighting the Afghans for control of Delhi.
So the Mughals were just spectators in their own capital.
Exactly. Abdali crushed the Marathas, but he didn't stay. He looted and left.
Yeah.
This left a massive power vacuum. The Marathas were broken. The Mughals were broken. So who is left standing?
The British East India Company.
The vacuum was perfect for them. They stepped in not as invaders, but initially as protectors and revenue collectors.
And we just drift toward the end. Shah Alam II.
Defeated by the British at the Battle of Buxar in 1764. This is the real turning point for British rule. After Buxar, the emperor grants the Diwani rights, the right to collect revenue of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa to the British.
So the British are now the tax collectors. The emperor is basically their pensioner.
He's an emperor in name only, living on a stipend from a foreign company.
Then Akbar II.
Who gave Ram Mohan Roy the title Raja, which is an interesting piece of cultural trivia. But the British stopped issuing coins in the Mughal name during his time. That's a clear signal. You don't matter anymore. We are the sovereign.
And finally, Bahadur Shah Zafar, the poet.
A tragic, almost romantic figure. He presided over a court of poets, including the great Khalid, but he had no army, no power. Then, in 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny, the Great Revolt, flared up against the British.
And the rebels marched to Delhi.
They marched to the Red Fort and proclaimed him Emperor of India.
He was an old man by then. He didn't really want to lead a revolution, did he?
He was a very unwilling leader, but he was the only symbol of unity left. When the rebellion failed, the British captured him. They executed his sons and exiled him to Rangoon in Burma.
He died there in 1862, and with him, the Mughal Empire officially ended.
From the master of the world to a prisoner in a foreign land, it's an incredible arc.
So, Section 7, synthesis. Let's just put a bow on this. Why did it fall? We've touched on these, but let's summarize, because it clearly wasn't just one thing.
No, it's a combination of fatal flaws. First, as you said, the succession crisis. They never had a law of primogeniture where the eldest son takes all. Every time an emperor died, there was a civil war. It killed the best generals and wasted mountains of money.
2, Aurangzeb's legacy.
His religious intolerance alienated the support base the Rajputs and Sikhs, and his Deccan Wars bankrupted the state. You just can't run an empire on an empty tank.
3, the Jagirdari crisis.
This is the administrative failure we talked about. Too many nobles or Mansabdars and not enough good land or paibaki to give them as payment. This led to corruption. Mansabdars squeezed the peasants, peasants rebelled, and revenue fell. A vicious cycle.
4, military stagnation.
And just stopped innovating. They relied on elephants and heavy cavalry while the world moved to light infantry and rapid-fire muskets. They stopped learning. They stopped looking outward.
And finally, the rise of regional powers. The empire just got too big and diverse to be managed from one center anymore. This brings us to the outro. It's been a wild ride. From Babur's carts at Panipat to Bahadur Shah's poetry in Rangoon.
It is the story of early modern India. The Mughals created the administrative framework that the British took over, and in many ways, the modern Indian state still uses. The district collector system, that's Mughal. The revenue records, they have Mughal roots.
They created a whole new culture.
They synthesized Persian and Indian culture into something unique, Hindustani culture.
And here is the final provocative thought for our listeners to chew on. We often think of empires falling because of external enemies, the British, the Persians. But the Mughal Empire seems like it collapsed from within first.
Absolutely. I would argue for what you could call the Superman theory. The Mughals built a system that was so highly centralized, so dependent on the person at the top, that it required a Superman to run it.
A genius.
A genius. Akbar, Sher Shah, even Aurangzeb, they were workaholics, brilliant minds, micromanagers.
But Supermen are rare.
Exactly. When the Supermen stopped being born, when you got emperors who were hedonistic or weak or just plain average, the system didn't just stall, it collapsed under its own weight. It was a system designed for a genius, but in the end, it was operated by fools.
That is a powerful takeaway. A system is only as good as the person running it unless the system is designed to survive bad leadership. The Mughals didn't build that safety valve.
They did not.
So next time you look at the Red Fort or the Taj Mahal, don't just see a pretty building. See a political statement. See the artifact of a specific moment where one family held the destiny of millions in their hands. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Always a pleasure. Keep questioning.